Hello, Julian Mustangs. This is the Math Spiral Review for May 5th. So the first problem we're going to do is going to be up here in the corner. Write 2 ways to correctly compare the following numbers using the less than, greater than, or equal to. So basically you don't have a choice. You do have to use these 2 numbers here, and you have to make those sentences true with either this sign, or this sign. So the first one we're going to do is I'm just going to leave the numbers the way that they are, 472. And then 427, and I'm going to say 472 is greater than 427, or I'm going to make that little alligator eat the bigger number. For another way to write this, you just flip the numbers, 427 versus 472. In order to write these, you would flip it, and you would say 427 is less than 472, making the alligator, again, eat the bigger number. And that's it for that problem. For the next one, you have to take these 2 numbers and you have to first of all round to the nearest 10, and then you have to round to the nearest 100. So we'll start by rounding to the nearest 10. So here's my tens place here and here's my tens place here. So with rounding, you have to look at this number. The number that I highlighted, the place value that we're going to round to, is going to look to the number behind it and ask it what to do. It's going to say, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to up my score or do I need to let it rest? And the 7, since it is 5 or more, is going to tell that 8 to up its score by 1, making this number round to 490, or taking that tens place value and upping it by 1. For the next one, this one is a little bit tricky. You have the 9 looking to the 8 to tell it what to do. If the 8 is 5 or more, then you need to up the 9 score, which is the case. However, this 9 means it needs to go to 10. So where does that extra 1 go? What that's going to do is that's going to make that 9 a 0, and it's actually going to up the score of the 3 to a 4, making your number look like this. So actually this number, 5,398, is going to round to the nearest tens place, 5,400. If you drew a number line for this one, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit so you can see it. Oops. If you would make a number line, your let it rest number would be 5,390, and 10 more would make it 5,400. So that's the reason why this number gets rounded up almost seemingly to the hundreds place. Because if we were to put it in the middle, it would be 5,395, and this number is 398, which would fit here, making it round up. Okay. When you're doing this with these numbers, we're going to go ahead and do this to the to the nearest 100. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. So if we're going to the nearest 100, which is going to be this place value here. Oops, sorry, that was meant to be a highlighter. If you were to go to the nearest 100, it would be here. So the 4 is going to look to the 8 now to tell it what to do, and this time the 8 gets to tell the 4 what to do. Because the 8 is 5 or more, it's going to up that 4 score to 5 and make the rest of the numbers 0 for 500. At the bottom, the 3 is now looking at the 9 to tell it what to do, and the 9 is going to tell the 3 to up its score because that 9 is a 5 or more. So the 3 ups its score then to also 400. So this number is getting rounded to 5,400 twice, even though they're in 2 separate place values. All right, the next one. Mike says that the below drawings are equivalent, meaning the same. Explain if he is correct. So what we're basically saying is this circle is shaded the same amount as this circle. If you're looking at it, you can tell that maybe the purple one is shaded in just a little bit more. If I were to take and cut this up into a little bit more of a place value so I could see it, this 2/3 then becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. This one is 3/5. I don't think there's anything that I can multiply 3 by to get 5. I could make like denominators, but they still would not be equivalent. So this is not an equivalent. So these 2 are not equivalent. You could say anything from like I cut them up differently and saw that that was the case. You could also take and show it in rectangular form if you're super careful. We did this in our Zoom meeting. If I were to take a rectangle, if I were to take this rectangle and split it in half to show the 2 different fractions, on the top I would have the purple at 2/3, so I'd go ahead and I'd cut this into thirds as evenly as I possibly could. And the bottom one is 3/5, so I'd go ahead and I'd cut this into fifths as best as I possibly could. And then I would show that here's my purple on the top, here's 2/3, and on the bottom I'll do orange for 3/5. When you're drawing it this way, you can see clearly that the 2/3 and the 3/5 are not equivalent. And we can prove that they're not equivalent by showing this right here. This is clearly showing that my 2/3 is bigger than my 3/5. So any way that you'd like to explain that, you can. All right, the next one. Mr. Jones had 1 2/8 pizza left over after his pizza party. After giving some away, she had, I think it should be he, because Mr. Jones, he had 6/8 left. What fraction of the pizza did Mr. Jones give away? So I'm just going to start by coloring it in exactly as the problem states. So the problem first states that he had 1 2/8 pizzas. So I'm going to start by coloring in 1 2/8 pizzas. So I'm going to color in a whole pizza. And then I'm going to color in 2 out of the 8 pieces that are over here on the other side. Now, after giving some away, so here's the key here. We do not know how much he gave away, but we know that he was left with 6/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to color in 6/8 and then see what's left over to see what he gave away. So if I color in 6/8, I just need to color in 6 of my already shaded parts, and you can do this with colored pencils or Xing out. I'm going to color in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've taken away 6/8, and what I have left over in orange is actually what this person kept. So what's left over here in this whole orange slice over here is going to be what they kept. If you're looking at this fraction-wise, it would be 1 2/8 minus 6/8, which would give us 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 8 total. So what was kept was 4/8. All right, I know these say bonus, but they're still mandatory. You still need to attempt to do them, and hopefully this is pretty easy. Write the following decimals in standard form. Standard form means write them just as you would see them like in real life. So writing this 3/10 in standard form, you could write it like this, 3 out of 10, which is fraction, but it says to write it in decimal. So this 3/10 fraction form is going to be the same thing as 0.3, with this 3 being in the tenths place value. Remember, we've been talking about this a lot. You have the hundreds, tens, and ones, decimal, tenths, and then hundredths. So I'm going to put a T with a TH here to show tenths, and an H with a TH to show hundredths. So because this magical spot right here is going to be my tenths place, this 3 also has to be in the tenths place. So 1/10 is the same thing as 1 out of 10, or 0 decimal with a 1 in the tenths place. 5/10, it would be a 0 decimal and a 5 in the tenths place. 9/10 would be a 0 decimal and that 9 in the tenths place as well. For our last problem today, this is one of my favorites. A shape is shown, so clearly it's just a random shape. Color the acute angles. If we remember, we have our right angle, which is exactly 90 degrees, and an acute angle is anything less than that 90-degree angle. So I'm going to just remind you and say less than 90 degrees. So an acute angle is anything that's smaller. You may need to turn your page around, so I'm going to start with this one. This angle right here, this helps if you take the corner of a page to put into it to show. This angle right here is less than 90 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shade it in. This is an acute angle. If I look at this angle is clearly over 90 degrees, so I'm not going to label that one. This angle though right here, definitely smaller than 90 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color in that. This angle down here, we actually proved this in our Zoom meeting that it was less than 90 degrees using a rectangular shape. So this one also gets colored in. This one over here though, when you put your page next to it, or if you were to take and rotate it so that the bottom one is straight, you could clearly see that this angle is greater than 90 degrees and therefore not something that you would color in. Okay, oops, there we go. Okay, Mustangs, that's it for today's math lesson. I hope this helped you out a little bit.